Millions of frontline workers keep our economy running and are provided with the latest technology to do their jobs. But digital adoption, especially by frontline workers, is really hard.
This is Frontline Innovators. We explore how to overcome challenges and achieve success when we empower our essential workers.
I'm Justin Lake.
And I'm Gene Signorini. Together, we speak with experts who are leading the way and driving digital transformation to the front line.
This podcast is sponsored by Skillful, on a mission to help frontline workers learn and use the technology needed to succeed in their jobs. My guest today is an experienced program management leader at Southwest Airlines, serving in the technical operations organization. He provides strategic and tactical leadership for the implementation, utilization, and support of mobile device and app utilization. He develops cross-functional, cross-organizational teams to enable mobility, RFID, and e-enablement solutions within the airline. Please welcome Chris Grubbs. Hey, Chris.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Really excited to have this conversation. And today I actually want to start off talking about something that I found in your LinkedIn post. I'm not going to put you on the spot here, but you had posted a fantastic article that was in HBR. It was called Good Leadership is About Asking Good Questions. The article was written by John Hagel III. And I read that article. And after I read that article, knowing that I was coming up on this interview with you, I felt a lot of pressure. And I wondered, am I going to be able to ask, good questions that would live up to that expectation today? So I feel a little bit extra pressure. But I really want to start off a little bit differently with you and ask, what was it that kind of hit the mark? First of all, do you remember posting, sharing that article?
I think that was a couple of years ago. Yeah, but I do remember that article, and it's very important as leaders that we listen.
Yeah. I think that's really the point of the article that I took away too, is not just about asking the questions, but really being listeners to the folks on the team. And so I really enjoyed the fact that you had posted that article, and just wanted to start off with that in part to make light of my ability to ask questions and see if I can live up to the great expectations. So let me kind of switch back around to how we normally start off this conversation. And that is really about what's the biggest challenge you see facing the deskless workforce today?
Well, as many other organizations today, we're in that digital transformation phase where we're transitioning from really antiquated process and systems to modernization. And the pandemic has helped us in some ways and has been a detriment in others in that regard. But we've been working on this plan for years, literally, and the introduction of our iPad solution for mechanics and inspectors we provided about 3.5 years ago to get started. That was in an effort to get our workforce used to using a tablet, having a tablet available, with the intent of expanding that use case in the future. So not only do we have manuals available now for aircraft and from our partners, but now we also have the ability to perform work duties and associate those and document those in new systems and processes that we're rolling out. So it's all transformative. We started building that infrastructure years ago in anticipation of today, and as we've seen the rollout of our new digital platforms, we are continuing to learn and ask questions. We are going through the learning curve, and of course it's slow, adjusting to new process and systems. And part of that is we are listening to the feedback that we're getting from our deskless users, right? The mechanics and inspectors that are at the airport, that are doing the gate calls, that are talking to the flight crews, that are talking to customers, even in some cases, about the aircraft, and how do we enable safe, compliant, effective solutions that are also efficient. And it's a big challenge, but we continue to chip away at it. That's one of the great things about Southwest Airlines. I'm going to plug another podcast real quick. Is the Seat Open is a new podcast series that Southwest has released, and there's great stories about Herb Kelleher and about Southwest being an innovation company that happens to fly planes. And, we often say we're a customer service company that flies aircraft. In addition to that, we're very innovative in how we approach what we do, and we get that innovation from our deskless workforce, from our people that are out there in engaging with customers, engaging with their peers out in the operation, and that's how we improve. It's not from big ideas that we have at headquarters or in tech offices. It's by talking to those end users and finding out what it is, what they think would help them be more efficient, to be more safe, to be more compliant, and then just working with them to implement those in smart, measured ways.
Chris, when you said this initiative started a few years back, do I understand it correctly that you didn't actually replace all of their legacy materials? So the binders, the manuals that you talked about before, it kind of sounds like you had both of them out in the field at the same time. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, somewhat. The manuals, it was an easy transition, really, from using paper manuals to digital. Uh, in addition to the iPads that we have deployed that we use very effectively out at the airport when we do get calls, in live operation, and then in the hangar using kiosks. So PC based with larger monitors where schematics can be brought up and looked at, and so the that transition started, like I said, 4 or 5 years ago, and has been really successful to the point now where uh, we're getting asked for. We still get the occasional request for printing capabilities, but more and more, I was like, "Can I have a bigger screen?" And so, one of the fun things that we've done this year, and we started last year, was getting new iPads for all the mechanics. So we've gone from the mini 8-inch screen up to a 10.2 inch screen, and given them that bigger real estate. And for the first time, rolling out a keyboard to go with it so that they can actually type in and complete their work activities on that one device, giving them full screen to use whatever applications or systems they need to on those devices, and at the same time being as efficient as we could. And that feedback came directly from the end users. Yeah, we like the size of the small one, it fits in my pants pocket, but and so we did a good bit of analysis and queried and surveyed our end users to say, which form factor would you like better? Do you want a keyboard and a bigger screen, or are you good with the small screen? 85% of our workforce, we had about 60% reply to a survey, which is really good.
Amazing.
Um, and then 85% of the respondents wanted a bigger screen with the keyboard. So it's by asking the question, encouraging response, and then acting upon that. So it's really what Southwest is all about.
That explanation actually, it kind of probably speaks to some of the answer of the next question that I want to ask you, which is really that, just to share a little bit from our view, we have seen some examples that digital transformation initiatives can be very stressful for the frontline workers. They're often, completely out of the loop right up to the moment that they're required to use the technology. And so the first is really a two-part question. The first is, do you see examples of that tech innovation causing frustration? And then, if so, what do you think can be done to improve that experience for those workers so that they can be successful, but perhaps a little less frustration? So maybe to the first part, do you see some of these initiatives, at least initially, causing stress and frustration for some of the target users?
Certainly, we've done a lot of work though with developing training materials with the end users to help mitigate some of that. Uh, we still have that challenge. It doesn't go away. I don't know what the secret sauce is to make that just go away, but we still have that challenge. One way we've tried to bridge that gap is engaging frontline supervisor leaders that are in the field, in the operation, and getting them to partner with us on getting feedback from their teams to bring it back to us. And one of the things we just started this past year was actually getting frontline mechanics and inspectors actually doing some pre-testing for us and getting their online feedback. Uh, it's very important that we get it right from them. And then they're also our advocates out to their peers, which is really the huge benefit is we targeted some of our more vocal uh, uh, mechanics and inspectors and said, hey, why don't you join us on this journey? And they are now our advocate and also our innovators, right? They are providing us, hey, what about this, what about that? And we value that. I mean, without them, we would struggle.
I'm curious, when you refer to those folks that you engage as the more vocal of the group, would you find that they were the more positive vocal folks, or were they perhaps maybe some of the more cynical folks, or did you not really delineate between those that you asked to participate?
No, we tried to take a good span of both. It's important to have both. You have in solutions, you have to have the contrarian voice. If
Yeah.
it's everything is great, you're gonna miss more. So having the person that tries to poke holes in solutions is really who you want engaged. And so we've really done, and it's a testament to our organization. We have a whole change leadership organization at Southwest with analysts and with project managers, and that's all they do is help us. And we have a process defined around how do we engage the end users, how do we get them involved, and we have a template that we really try to follow across the organizations. And it's leadership like that that comes directly from Gary Kelly and from Bob Jordan and from Tom Nealon to encourage that change leadership perspective, and having senior leaders in that that is their job, is to help us with that change. And so it's been a huge benefit to have that mindset within the organization across operations, but especially as we've been transitioning over the last few years.
I love the idea that your organization is so deliberate in your handling of change management that you actually, kind of have a template and a standard approach for how you go about doing that. I feel like there's likely some stories. Can you think of any examples? Obviously, we can leave proper names out of the conversation, but are there any examples that you can think of where you engaged some folks from the field that became champions of that solution? I think that'd be great for us to hear how that might have gone so well.
Yeah, in all honesty, I don't have that hands-on experience with that
Okay.
change leadership team.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard some anecdotal responses, but I think overall is just encouraging those people to use their voice, right, and
Yeah.
and to honestly listen, back to our listening theme, right, and taking what they're telling us and making it actionable. I think that's really what it boils down to.
I think that's fantastic, and I have seen firsthand some examples of bringing some folks in, kind of from the field into headquarters to get them to participate on the project teams. And I've seen the results of when those folks now flip over from just being a participant in the project to actually becoming an evangelist. And there's nothing better, particularly in this group of frontline workers. I think, I've spent enough time out in the field, kind of seeing behind the scenes of how things actually work on these projects to see that there's even in the best of cultures, there's often a little bit of us versus them, the people in the field versus the people at headquarters that really don't know what they're talking about. And so to have one of those people kind of convert to becoming the evangelist and then go back out into the field and say, no, I told those people at headquarters what we really needed, right? That's fantastic. And frankly, I mean, you made the point at the top of the conversation that we get really good feedback when we engage those folks. So even if they didn't become evangelists, we're still getting good intel from the field about what those men and women really need for them to be successful. But perhaps the better part of that is that they also become evangelists that can speak probably more effectively to the change management than anything that we could say from a headquarters standpoint, right? So it has, there's just so many facets to the value that can bring to, a successful change management. So that's awesome. So let's shift gears a little bit. We haven't really talked about what your role is. So I did a quick introduction and kind of glossed over some of the details, but tell us a little bit more about what your role is and what you're up to these days.
Well, as a program manager within the technical operations, which is our maintenance department, you know, oftentimes people say, "Well, what is TechOps?" And it gets confused with technology operations, right?
Yeah.
Um, TechOps in the airline industry now is what we refer to as maintenance operations, and so it's pretty normal within the industry that TechOps is maintenance operations. Maintenance operations is all about mechanics, the people that turn the wrenches that are working on the aircraft. These are men and women that have. So I've been at Southwest 8 years, and I'm a baby in the company. I mean, I work with our mechanics that have been there 30 years, 32 years, 28 years. I mean, if you're not a 20-year, have seniority, have been there 20 years, you haven't seen.
You're still a new hire.
Yes, I mean, you haven't seen anything. So my perspective as a newbie, just 8 years in, um, is I have a lot to learn from these people that have seen this airline change dramatically over the last 20, 30, 40, and 50 years. I mean, starting with 3 aircraft doing regional service just in Texas to serving 100 and what are we up to 103 different locations across the US and the Caribbean, and into Central America, serving Hawaii, which was something that people were started asking her back in the 90s. When are we going to Hawaii? And finally being a part of the organization when we're actually delivering on that dream, is tremendous. And so, it's an honor, it's a privilege to work there. I feel like I'm in the shadow of legends, and just being present and just being in the room is a gift, honestly. But my work, as you read off at the beginning, working on mobility within maintenance. How do we provide tools that are effective, efficient, compliant, safe, provide timeliness back to our mechanics and inspectors that are out there in the field doing the operation, and what do they need to be more efficient. And so my job is really to do the whole, we call it cradle to grave of solutions and products that we provide to those individuals that run our operation. From working with our strategy teams, our innovation teams, developing business cases, developing projects, doing production support on projects, delivering new projects that are all focused on making our end users' life, work life better, and being safe, and compliant. So that's really our focus in that. And so mobility takes the shape of iPads today, and then different apps that we have on there, and the connectivity that's available on those devices. Um, we rely on VPN on all of our services. We have multiple cellular providers that we have partnered with across the country and throughout, um, the Caribbean and Central America, to provide connectivity on our devices wherever we are, so that we're connected. Um, Very, very important. And so, without our partners and the carriers, without our partners across technology, within the other operational departments, I mean, it's all about what we can do together. And so with RFID, my focus has really just been on how do we leverage RFID technology within technical operations. Um, and you especially see this in our emergency equipment that's on our aircraft. We are responsible for making sure that all of our equipment, is not expired and is compliant with rules and regulations set forward, but also what the FAA has set as standards. And so, we have built, with partners, have the capability to utilize some RFID uh, tagging on products, and be able to do inventory on an aircraft in a very efficient manner. Um, and then how do we grow that use case into other components? So the the other use case for RFID is our warehouses. So you can imagine when we operate 700 plus aircraft, we have to have parts for said 700 aircraft at our different locations. So, our warehouse operations within technical operations is uh, quite overwhelming, honestly, and trying
Yeah.
to leverage new technologies within the warehouse management space is an ongoing goal of ours. Is to transform that environment into a more efficient, safe, and compliant environment. So lots of opportunities with RFID in that space. Um, and then the other component is enablement, and this is one that is really fun to me because it's really about enabling the biggest IoT project or object that Southwest has, which is an aircraft. And so, we think about how we can connect our crew in the aircraft and give them the most up to date information that we have available to us, and we're doing that through enablement. And this is a strategic journey that we have, which requires partnership on delivering aircraft with key components, both hardware and software. And then, how do we leverage that technology on some of our older aircraft, and what is our strategy there? So that is definitely a more of a long term effort, but we do want to provide an environment to our flight crews, both the in-flight representatives there in the cabin area and also in the flight deck to our pilots, captains, and first officers, to give them um, a different perspective on the information than what they're also getting through the avionics in the dash, if you will.
Yeah. Chris, I have to say, to, to think about all the things that you're involved with, so you know that I've spent some time doing some work around the airline business, and it never ceases to amaze me how complex your business really is. And I know I'm also a member of the traveling public, and I am certain, even though I know a lot about what happens behind the scenes, we still take for granted all that's happening behind the scenes to keep those planes in the air and to keep things running on time and to make sure that our bags are getting to the right place at the right time and all of that kind of stuff. And when you just highlighted your role, you really talked about just some of the complexities. I mean, something as simple sounding as putting an iPad in the hands, of a mechanic. It's not that simple, and tracking, parts for a fleet of aircraft is just not that simple, right? So you guys have so many facets of the organization, and then when you mention connectivity, that is something that I, experienced firsthand. So most other industries that have maybe similar numbers of moving parts as you do are working in facilities that are largely theirs. So they can control the networking, right? They can put in their own wireless infrastructure in their own buildings, and they can decide where they want the access points. And I know one of the complexities that happens in the airline business is that, you're largely working in buildings that you don't own. You don't have the luxury of just putting an access point wherever you want. You're often dependent on carrier networks. And, no matter what the maps tell us, those carrier networks are not as ubiquitous everywhere that you need them to be, right? And so, I know it was just for you, it was just describing your role, but there's so much complexity in there to make these solutions work and work well. And at the same time, a big focus of our conversation here is around the end user experience. So, dealing with all the technical aspects of what you just talked about and the solution design and making sure that all the ones and zeros are going to the right places, but also doing so in a way that can give the user an experience where they can feel safe and be successful and, be productive in their work is, much easier said than done. So it was just an amazing introduction there.
Thanks. Herbert Kelleher always said that the airline business is the biggest, greatest team sport, and it really is. I mean,
Yeah.
coming from a telecom background, I always enjoyed the intricacies of telecom, but that is one small facet of the operation that we have at an airline. And I mean, it's overwhelming at times, but it's empowering, right? There's no limit to the opportunities to improve. Even if you have the best airline in the world, there's always multiple opportunities to enhance customer service, to provide more capabilities to our operational folks on the ground as they service those customers, right? So it's it's awesome. It really is. It's awesome because it's huge, but it's that's what makes it so fun,
Yeah.
and it creates passion. It does.
I can hear it in your voice. And it actually is a great segue into the next thing I wanted to ask you about, which is really about how you prioritize, because you just said there's an endless list of opportunities for improvement of safety and efficiency. You mentioned something earlier, which I think is really important. You didn't use these words, but you were essentially speaking to the quality of life for your teammates that are in these various roles. And so there are a lot of different variables to consider there. And when you look out at the airline business and say, well, there's like virtually an unlimited number of places that we could go to apply innovation, where are the innovation requests coming from in your organization? And how do you even begin to prioritize those to say, well, we can't do all 100 things right now. How do we pick off the top two or three that make the most sense?
Yeah. So another one of Herb's famous quotes is, what is our priority today? Is it one, two, or three? He said, yes. Right. Um, Within the airline business, you hit the nail on the head. I struggled early in my career to work with my leadership on what is my number one priority. When I came to Southwest 8 years ago, I struggled with that, and it wasn't. We didn't set a priority on what we were going to accomplish that day, or I mean that year, or in 6 months, or quarterly, right? We had these are our top priorities, but then on a daily basis, we would manage. What is our priority today? At the same time, keeping a focus on our roadmap in all the things that we're trying to do, so that you don't leave anything too far behind. It's you know, uh, One of the analogies I like to use is all the plates keep spinning, right? The object is not to have one plate spinning 100 miles an hour; it's to have 20 plates spinning, just spinning, right? Um, and so if I can keep my plates spinning and moving forward, right, then that's a successful day, week, month, quarter. And so, that's the only way to look at it. And we truly get our innovation from the front line, and we work with them on helping us prioritize this, right? And a good, I have to give a shout out to my innovation teammates. We and the company and the leadership that we have values innovation so much that we have a corporate innovation team, small but mighty. I mean, that's the Southwest way. We have small teams, but we have a lot of teams, but you have to have them. And so we have a small corporate innovation team. We also have a technology innovation team, and then within TechOps, within maintenance operations, we have a small innovation team. And it really takes all these teams working together on these priorities, and then working through what this innovation looks like. A good example of this is we did some time studies and some work out in the field just last week, based on some feedback we were getting from our mechanics out at the airport. And they're like, hey, all of our capabilities that you guys have given us this year are great, but what about this? And so we're looking at that. What about this, right? And kudos to my partners in the innovation teams. They were all boots on the ground last week, observing, taking feedback. It's like doing a focus group where you bring customers in and do a focus group. Well, kudos to our innovation team, because they go out to where our customers are and observe the work environment, and document it and make suggestions, and take that feedback. And that's again, it's just one of the great things about Southwest Airlines that I don't think you get in a lot of other places.
Well, I think that's something that I hope everybody can pay real close attention to. You said something that's important, and I think it's indicative of the culture at Southwest, which is that your folks felt comfortable coming back to the innovation team and asking for some things that would improve, the results or their experiences with that technology. And I think that says a lot. We've noticed that there's a lot of fear and anxiety, and I've touched on this a couple of times already just in this conversation, from frontline workers who fear that their ability to use the technology reflects on their competency, or the evaluation of their competency for their job. And it's something that's troubling to me because I hear this a lot from end users, and we see the behaviors from end users. And it worries me a little bit about the cultures in some of these organizations where employees fear being candid about their use of this technology. And so my takeaway from what you just said is it sounds like the Southwest culture is mitigating that right out of the gate by allowing them to feel comfortable and to come to the innovation team and to come to you, other members of headquarters, and feel comfortable sharing what they're looking for and how the solution would be better without fearing any repercussions for that. And it sounds so simple, and it actually is pretty simple, but it seems to be something that's missing from the cultures of some of the other organizations we've seen.
Yeah, it's something I don't always value, to be honest with you, and having these kind of
Yeah.
conversations with people in other companies and other industries, it reminds me of the opportunities and how we really are employee focused, and providing that that work environment for our frontline workers, to be able to innovate and give us the feedback that they need.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that goes back to what Herb and Colleen set up at the very beginning of the company. And sometimes we may get frustrated with how we operate. But Herb, was in his wisdom was like invited the unions to come in and to be a part of Southwest Airlines. And it's something you do not see at other companies because it makes it more difficult, honestly, right? And but there's a level of negotiation that you have that does give your in operational workers some comfort in knowing that they have a union that's helping them, with their feedback to the company. And so again, I don't think we would have the engagement that we have. And I think at a lot of companies, you see, people are worried that it'll look bad on me if I, you know, give feedback. And, you know, again, kudos to Herb and his wisdom for seeing that a union can really help facilitate and get past that barrier. It's a value, it's a value that you don't look at when you talk about unions a lot, but it is a key component to our environment. And I do think that it helps provide that safety net so people do feel safe in sharing, what their real experience is, without fear of repercussion. So,
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And actually, talking about the unions, I think is actually a really important element of why I believe supporting frontline workers with technology is such a vastly different conversation than a lot of the things that we think about with corporate workers, right? So, training on how to use Oracle, getting people to engage with SAP and maybe your reservation systems and other things like that, right? In the airline business, sure, those things have some of the same technical complexities of them, but because they're not represented workforces in most cases, it's just it has a fewer layers of complexity perhaps than what we typically see with frontline workers. And so I do think, your example, I've seen projects that have been really impacted by the perception of the union and what they wanted the men and women in their union to participate with from a tech standpoint. And that actually really challenged, the end user adoption of these technologies. And so anything that can be done to improve the culture right out of the gate is only going to make that more effective down the road. And it just speaks volumes to how Southwest has handled a lot of that. So I'm curious to hear, we've talked a bunch about some of the different technologies. You talked about RFID, you talked about mobility, you talked about the e-enablement with the aircraft. How do you learn about new technologies, emerging technologies? I suspect, you have other members on your team who are also scanning the market in some way for some of those technologies. I'd be curious to hear how you're learning and how that has changed since COVID, where, we can't all go to the same trade shows and things like that we used to participate with.
yeah, I mean, trade shows are fun to visit with people and kind of see some new stuff. Um, I learned after going to the junkets a few times that there's a few that provide value, and there's several that are just an opportunity to meet and greet, right? So,
Yep.
or sales opportunities.
Yep.
So, honestly, part of our challenge is really trying to learn where we can best find out about these technologies. And it's a diverse network, right? I rely heavily on my innovation team. They stay plugged in more to what's going on in the industry, and specific innovations, and then staying plugged in. One thing about working on Apple products and with Android products is you got to stay plugged in and be up on the releases of the software and the hardware. And so, that's I came up uh, in my career as a software development, so in the software business, for telecom, but my heart is still around software. So finding out about all the different software is just kind of like a hobby to me. So whenever Apple has a keynote, or WWDC, I'm there. The next at night, the next day, whatever, I'm reading, I'm watching the videos. Same with Google I/O, right? Seeing what they're doing on the Android platforms, seeing, watching the Samsung releases, the videos of the new Samsung equipment. It's all part of the fun, and so that's more of a hobby to me than anything else. Learning about from an airline perspective, there are some valuable publications that come out. I have to give a shout out to one of our captains, Will Ware. He is the main driver behind our electronic flight bag at Southwest Airlines, and really throughout the industry. He chairs a cross organization, co-chairs a cross organization EFB forum, electronic flight bag forum, that pulls together all the airlines from all over the world in an environment to discuss what capabilities are on the horizon for the electronic flight bag. And whether it's mounted in an aircraft, or on an iPad or another tablet, right? The opportunities there are immense, right? We've talked about the opportunities for innovation. And so, you know, having leaders like Will Ware in the company, where I can just email him and say, "Hey, Will, what's going on in the avionics?" Or, within my own organization, we have engineers, and our supply chain stays really up to date on what's happening. We rely on third party vendors also, that are scour the industries and provide reviews and updates, and tell us what vendors are in this space. And so we partner with them also, and leverage those assets. So it's just, I really find that it's a matter of connecting and building the network, and then leveraging that. I have to say, over the last year, with COVID, I really got into podcasts. So it's fun to be interviewing and participate on podcasts, but just listening to the different perspectives that people bring in different areas, different topics, and long form discussion. Right, I think it's a format that's what's so powerful about the podcast, is we can have a 1 hour conversation versus a 10-minute pointed conversation about a specific technology. We can just cuss and discuss, if you will. So it's part of the fun, but it's got to be part of just your hobby of looking at what's out there. Yeah, I had a boss once. We were working on some new technology, and I was like, "Hey, I don't have time to read this new tech manual." He's like, "Well, I guess you got weekend reading to do then." And I didn't think it was funny at the time, but I have developed I don't think, I won't say a love. I've desired a discipline to stay up with the
Yeah.
technology, in non work hours, right? It becomes a hobby. People ask me, "What's your hobbies?" Besides my kids playing sports, my hobby is keeping up with the tech industry, right? So I'm a nerd. What
I,
can I
I,
say?
I think, I mean, Chris, I think there's something to be said for the fact that for those of us that are in the tech space, this is not something that you can do just as a job, right? I mean, if you don't have a genuine interest in learning about these things, perhaps even if just for your personal, electronic, desires as well. It's really hard to keep up from a work standpoint. I mean, just recently, my wife just broke her Apple Watch, and so we're now in the market to replace her Apple Watch. And I mean, it's just so simple, except right up until the point where you get onto the Apple website and you realize there's now 8,000 variations of the Apple Watch, right? And the other thing that, I think it has such an impact on me when I think about work, and I think about the personal challenge of saying, okay, well, which one of these do we want to get for my wife, right? We're talking about a several $100 purchase. I know it's not going to last forever. Do we want to buy the latest and greatest technology so that it lasts the longest? Or do we want to buy the second or third generation back because it's a little bit less expensive? And so, you can be a little bit more, budget conscious on that. When you think about having to make that same decision for an enterprise like you guys are involved with, I mean, just the complexity is exponentially greater. And so I know that that's some of the things that you've had to deal with in the past in terms of, selecting which iPad and which iPad accessories and how you're going to charge them and all of those things that go with that. Those are, they're complicated enough for us to just decide in our personal lives. But when you're talking about 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 devices that have to last in an enterprise environment for, 2 to 3 years, there's a lot to that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the fun.
Yeah. So I think I was going to ask you what advice you'd give to others who are trying to stay up on this. I think you just gave part of that, but I'm curious if there's anything else. So the first takeaway that I'd have is that this can't be just something that you come in and carve out an hour on Monday morning to read up on the latest tech journals. It's going to take a greater commitment than that, and you're probably going to need to have some genuine interest in this stuff, that it doesn't feel so much like work when you're reading about these things after hours and stuff like that. Is there anything else that I missed from that perspective there that you'd give as advice to others?
I think, be curious. Right? I think we and be a learner. There, you know, there is not a time when I stop learning something. And a lot of the things I post on LinkedIn are more reminders and coaching myself, than it
Right.
is, trying to tell somebody else how to do what they need to do. It's reminders for me, because you know leadership is difficult. It's a huge challenge. Being consistent, right? And then doing your day-to-day job, and delivering, to your customers has always got to be the number one up there. And being technically proficient. I mean, we got to stay engaged. So, I long ago gave up my 9 to 5 job. You know, when I realized, in technology, there is no such thing as a 9 to 5 job. And, we all hated being on the rotation for production support, carrying the pager around, for a week, and over the weekend, and being tethered to a computer. So I could never be too far away from a computer, and I think, that really just set a mindset within me. Although I might not be tied to a computer and have to carry it with me everywhere I go, just in case. Um, but there's still downtimes. I mean, I haven't been a great example for my kids when I'm on my phone when we're, at a dinner. But I see an interesting article pop up on LinkedIn, and here I am reading an article, and they're like, "Dad, quit playing on your phone." I'm like, "Well, I'm working." "Well, quit working," right? So it's you I do it that dynamic has changed a little bit now that my kids are teenagers, and I have to purposefully put it down, and walk away for a period of time. But then when everybody goes to bed, I have plenty of time. So
No, I actually, in terms of our habits, I think you raise a really interesting point. Technology, I've been involved in mobile technology for most of my career. I know that you have as well. And there are a lot of people that view mobile as being a tether to, almost cause some restraint. And I've always looked at it completely from the opposite view that mobile technology actually gives us the freedom to, place shift, time shift a lot of the things that we otherwise have to do. We have immensely more flexibility now than workers did 20 or 30 years ago. And I think that's an amazing opportunity for us to leverage mobile. I think it also, just thinking about the frontline workers, they definitely don't have quite the same flexibility that you and I might in the nature of our jobs. But I also think that that's something important that we need to remind them when we're, exploring change management and the messaging around the technology is that we're not trying to use the technology to eliminate your job. We're trying to, use the technology to make your job better, to allow you to be more successful, to improve the quality of your life so that you can focus on things that can allow you to be safer and yes, more efficient. The company is always looking for more efficiency from all of us, but to look at the technology as an enabling tool rather than as a restraining tool, and that's tough. That's tough, but it also speaks to how you've talked a lot today about the culture. You can say that message all day long, but if it's not backed up by a culture that supports that and that represents that, then that message probably won't be very well received.
Yeah, it's all in what we do, right? We
Yeah,
can say things till we're blue in the face, but people will measure us and our character and our intent by what we do. So it's very important,
absolutely.
and it's an ongoing challenge, right? But
Yeah,
we have to do it, and being a part of a team that values the innovation and sending people boots on the ground out there working in the field and observing and talking and listening uh, is just invaluable. So
yeah,
that's where it really comes back to is being out there observing, taking that feedback and soliciting the innovative ideas from those workers that are doing the job.
yeah,
It does help that they know they're not in danger of losing their job because they do have that union backing,
yeah,
and so again, I think that gives us a unique opportunity. But as a project or program manager, my whole job is to uh, put myself out of a job in that I want to complete this project so that I don't ever have to come back to it, right?
right.
Or just provide a little care and feeding, production support as needed. And so, that's I had a mentor back in the software days is like, hey, we're building this software to put ourselves out of our job. And so, that mindset is very, very important, and it's key to delivering a product that doesn't just serve an immediate need, but serves a need that doesn't require 24/7 support, right?
Yeah,
And that's really hard, but it's so empowering once you're able to do that, and that you can do it, and see examples of other organizations that have done it. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm a huge Apple fanboy and how they do their software updates, and you know what we used to take systems offline for 6 hours at a time to do an update. I now do on my phone, and I complain if it takes more than 4 minutes, right? Um, and it could be a total new operating system update. Um, it's just amazing how far we've come in technology, and that just tells me there's no end point for that. It's just going to continue to improve, and we have tons of opportunity.
yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right that our experiences in the consumer realm with all the technology that we have around us have really influenced our expectations about how things should happen at work too, right? So all of our users are experiencing the same thing, whether it's Apple or an Android device. They are experiencing those things as consumers, and so when we bring clunky technology to them that's not easy to use, that is frustrating for them. And so I think the expectations for all of us have changed dramatically over the last 10 or 15 years, in large part thanks to Apple and others that have been innovative in that space. And so we have an obligation to keep up with that expectation, right? Because we want to get the users to use the technology and to be successful with it, but we have to make sure that we're delivering things that are on par with their consumer experiences. So
Yeah,
that
and,
makes a lot of
and we
sense.
have to provide that value, right? It's got to be simple, and it's got to provide them something that they find value in. And so it's very key. Again, it goes back to that being out there and listening to them, and then delivering on what they're saying. um,
Yeah.
you know it's a testament to how the software industry has changed, and from a waterfall, give me your requirements, and 6 months later I'll give you something that might meet the engineering spec that we interpreted you wanted. um, but I remember in those days we would deliver a product and it would not get used because, you know, the perspective changed, or we just did not capture or interpret what we were hearing the correct way. So being able to iterate and tweak and change and implement and tweak and implement um, is a concept that is just invaluable in our business, and really in our opportunities that we have. Right? Is okay. We may not have hit the mark 100% on this release, but we're listening to you, and this change is coming in the next release, and but then you have to deliver on that. That's the other thing that I've seen examples of is we say we're working on it, but then never deliver it. We have to deliver, and that has to be our goal. Is we hear you, here's what we're doing, and then deliver on it. Right? Is the key component to that, and
Like any other relationship between teams, between people, when we say something, we've got to follow through
you
with it,
got to
or the
do it.
relationship starts to deteriorate, right?
Yes, yeah,
They won't trust you, and then when you really need their support to deal with some of that change, you won't have the same relationship equity that you once did.
yes, sir.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. What excites you about the future in terms of where you're headed? Anything you see out on the horizon that's got you really charged up?
I mean, just our opportunities with the technology that we have and the aircraft is continuing to evolve. A lot of people don't realize that the development cycle for hardware on an aircraft is long, and it's funny. I like to give people the example. 3G networks from our cell carriers are all being retired or have been retired, but yet there's still key functionalities throughout our industry that require that have only been updated with 3G. And actually, that product came out after LTE 4G was available. But because of the development cycles, right, it's hard to include the latest technology into that development. And so it's just what I'm really excited about is partnering on how we can leverage new technology on aircraft versus waiting for that technology to already be obsolete before we get it. It's not a easy challenge, and it requires uh, a lot of partnership. All the aircraft manufacturers out there really struggle uh, with that
Mhm.
component, and providing the
Yeah.
latest technology in their newest aircraft is just always going to be a challenge with everything that we have to do to get an aircraft airworthy. So
It sounds
it's
it's frustrating to hear it on the outside, but when you start to peel that back, you think about the number of regulatory agencies to do with FCC regulation on top of that, right? So you've got two major government entities just here in the U.S., and we're just one of the many countries that they operate in. I mean, it almost seems like it's hard to imagine that they can ever get anything out the door with all of the constraints that they have to work within.
mhm. Yep. We partner, or we get to see the fruits from the work that the military does in a lot of instances, right? So they don't have as much regulatory um, concern, I guess is the right way,
Right.
right, to say it. And so they're able to bring technology to market a little bit faster on military aircraft. So just being able to use that as a test bed opportunity, and again, going back to Captain Will Ware and the EFB, is partnering with pilots from the Air Force, from the Navy, from the Army. It provides us a great opportunity. They can actually try out new technology in the cockpit that is not really an option, for an airline. And so being able to have lessons learned, and safety documentation and white papers and research that is done, only helps us in that regard. So it's a lot of fun to be in that environment.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about what Will is involved with the EFB, the global EFB forum. That's an interesting example with the delicate balance with the airlines, in that you are largely fierce competitors with most of the other companies that might be sitting in that same forum. Yet there are still opportunities to collaborate for the betterment of the entire industry overall. and to probably streamline some of the regulatory compliance issues and things like that. So that's I've heard about that several times, not just with the EFB, but with other with flight attendant solutions and things like that. And I'm sure it's done in maintenance, TechOps and stuff like that as well, which is just to you're still going to keep the uniqueness about your different organizations, but to find some ways to be able to collaborate so that it can be a little bit easier to innovate for each of the member companies. That's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, again, Herb really set the leadership on that. Right, is he had some really good relationships with American CEOs right across town. Um, Fiercely competitive, but at the same time, we can be friendly
Yeah.
and cooperate. And the formation of lobby organizations that work together, uh, for the airline industry through the government agencies is a key component to our continued success. So it is a balance, right? And but at the same time, there's a lot of opportunity for us to take back to the Airbuses of the world. This is what the industry as a whole is looking for. Please help us innovate in this space, right? Is all we're asking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. So tell us a little bit about how you came into this role. Tell us about your background that led you here. I mean, it goes all the way back to Abilene Christian University. I believe you're a Texas native. Is that true?
Well, not really. I mean,
Okay.
growing up, we lived all over the country. I went to
Okay.
13 different schools through my career, so I had the opportunity to be able to learn and to adjust quickly. And
Okay.
so it's a valuable lesson in today's world where change is constant. And so that was kind of how I was raised. And so I mean, kudos to my parents. I mean, I don't know that they did it purposefully, but um, I think we moved a lot of times out of necessity. But it was valuable lessons. The Some of my peers that I work with are Army or Air Force children that have the same experience. I think it really helps us um, to be flexible. I mean, we learn early on, right? You got to make relationships quick, and you got to meet the right people. And there are definitely skills that I learned through that. But yeah, after graduating Abilene Christian, I was looking for a job in business. Believe it or not, my degree was in history, but I took some business classes as when I was a senior, just as opportunity for some electives, and I really wished I had gone back and changed my major, but I was not into staying another year or two in school and collecting more debt. So I graduated, got out, and had the great opportunity to work at Sprint in the call center. So my first job out of college was working in a call center, talking to people about their long distance bill. Um, and then I had an opportunity where the IT team was working on some new software for the call center, and they were needing some testers. So I volunteered to be on the testing team, and that transitioned to me helping kind of lead the feedback process for the testing team, and then transitioning over to the IT team and actually working on that product from a testing IT testing perspective, which was new at the time. Like, this was in the mid '90s, right? So we were just getting our first PCs out to the call center floor, and Mr. Watson kept popping up, and so. Because we just didn't have enough memory to run the software, but we worked through all that, and I just had opportunities to grow with it at Sprint. I had great leaders that just gave me opportunities to do different things, to do um, requirements gathering and documentation, and learning that process. Actually, doing software development for a while, learning small talk, believe it or not. And so, that user interface and design philosophy was key to my education on the job. And then then transitioning into a project management type role and working on different projects across the business. And then I had a great opportunity in the early 2000s to move over to one of our business units at Sprint and work in our product development organization on what software we were developing for our products to support the products, for sales, for customer service, and for billing. and to take a look at, how do we transform our systems that we support these products with, and then how do we streamline our product set to fit our systems, which was a different kind of philosophy. We were always product driven, so transitioning a little bit and to try to balance that a little bit more with system and product. Um, and so then I took some opportunities to try to do some consulting work, and then finally ended up at Southwest about 8 years ago. Amazingly enough, implementing a new call center platform. So it came full circle for me back to my call center roots at Southwest, and I'm grateful for that opportunity. And then again, having great leadership within Southwest and opportunities within the company to move within the technology organization to different areas to get involved with enterprise mobility. And then an opportunity came up in TechOps, which was one of my customers in the enterprise mobility team, and to kind of to be more of a opportunity to lead from a business perspective, the mobility for mechanics and inspectors and the work that we do there. So yeah, that's kind of that's where how I got here.
That's an amazing background. And you mentioned a couple of things that if we have any listeners that are younger than perhaps 30 years old, you mentioned two things that stand out to me that we may have to provide a glossary for them. The first is that we mentioned pagers earlier in the conversation,
Yes.
and there'll be a lot of people that have no idea what that really is, or maybe they've heard about them as some relic from their parents' generation. The other thing is you mentioned long distance. And that's something that occurred to me recently, that we just don't really charge for long distance anymore in the same way that we used to. It's kind of just gone away. And that actually was such a big part of our lives from a telecom standpoint, a couple of decades ago. And now to people, to my son who's just about to turn 19, like he'll never understand being cautious about ringing up a long distance charge. So it's interesting to hear your background, and I really appreciate you sharing that. One thing we do have to wrap up here. I knew this was going to happen. We're coming up close. In fact, I think we're over time a little bit here, but it's been such a great chat. I've wanted to keep it going. I really do want to encourage people to connect with you on LinkedIn, and it's not just for the normal networking, but I've noticed this throughout our conversation today, and it reflects a lot what I've seen in your posting on LinkedIn, which is you have a very um, uh, great appreciation for leadership, both in your leadership to others that you work around, and also the leadership that is guiding your way a little bit too. And so I really appreciate that about you on a personal level. I appreciate you sharing those things with us today. But I'd also say that to anybody that's followed any of your LinkedIn posts, you often post about leadership topics. And so I think people should connect with you just to follow some of those things that you post, if for no other reason. And so I really appreciate you being a part of the conversation today.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it.
Yeah, so we're going to have to wrap it up there. I've really, really enjoyed the discussion today. I hope that you found the conversation as enjoyable as I have. And if so, please share and rate the podcast. 5-star ratings help ensure that it gets promoted to other professionals like you that are innovating on the front lines. This podcast is sponsored by Skillful, the mobile digital adoption platform for deskless and frontline workers. Visit the website at skillful.com. That's SKYLLFUL.com. And if you or someone you know is out there innovating on the front lines, we'd love to hear about it. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn and share your story, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Chris.